Hi,
Oh,
everybody. Todd Nash, President of Oregon Cattlemen's Association. I'm here today with Representative Mark Owens from House District 60. Mark, you want to tell us just a little bit more about yourself before we get going here?
perfect. Yeah, thanks, Todd. As Todd said, I am a state representative for House District 60, which serves about 37.4% of the southeast corner of the state. All of the counties of Malheur, Harney, Lake, Baker, Grant, and a little bit of Deschutes. It's been an honor and privilege to serve those communities, but I am a farmer, first generation farmer, and been back on my farm for about 3 weeks. Really enjoying that, enjoying getting back with my family. And one of my side jobs, besides putting up hay, Todd, is, as you know, buying some hay.
Yeah, and appreciate you getting on here today. I know you've needed a little time to deflate from the session that was pretty topsy-turvy and kept you busy the whole time. And appreciate your good work down there and being a champion for Oregon Cattlemen's Association. I was looking at the last YouTube we made, and it was a year ago. And things have changed a little bit in the hay market, and that's what I wanted to visit with you about here today, Mark. And you want to just dive into that and tell us some of the things that you're seeing out there?
Yeah, that'd be good, Todd. As we traveled around last year purchasing hay, mainly in Southeast Oregon, I talked to a lot of farmers, and prices were at an all-time high. I mean, we were paying up to $385 a ton for hay that would be pressed or shipped overseas. Domestic hay for the dairies was not too far behind that. And feeder hay was, really dependent upon that relationship base that you have, but it was also approaching all-time highs. And a lot of the farmers asked me, how does this end? And I was pretty, I think, cautious that this is not sustainable. How this ends is probably not going to be good. We've seen it a couple times, 2008, 2009, when prices, in my mind, got out of control and they came crashing down. Once again, what we ended up doing as an agricultural community is we priced ourselves out of the market, Todd. So last year when prices got that high, when we're talking export hay, I mean, they were coming into Korea, Japan, and China at 680 plus a metric ton. And believe it or not, those dairies over there have nutritionalists also. And they said, hey, we cannot afford to feed this high priced hay. And they started changing their rations. And a lot of those dairies started feeding, up to 50% less alfalfa. And we kept buying alfalfa. We started slowing down in price in the fall. And then this winter, the price started bottoming out. What has happened on the international side is that there is now a glut of hay because those dairies stopped feeding, like we said, up to half the hay they were. And now there's about a 5 to 6 month supply of hay in the pipeline. So either sitting at the press itself, sitting at the port in China, or sitting in those dairies in Japan, Korea, and China. And the press market or international market is pretty much crashed, Todd. Very few presses have any contracts for the next couple of months to ship out. The hay that they have on hand is about twice the value of what they can sell it for. They're bleeding money. Let's just talk a little bit about our dairy, what happened in the dairy industry in the last 12 months too. Is last year, I mean, the dairymen were getting some pretty good prices for their milk. They weren't making much money at all because hay prices and feed prices were so high, but they were able to cash flow some. Milk prices now are as low as they've been in 2018. Class 3 milk 2 weeks ago was $14 and something a hundredweight. This last week it hit $15.35 a hundredweight. Break even price for those, ladies and gentlemen, is about $21 a hundredweight. So they don't have enough money to buy hay either. So you have the international market and you got the dairy market that has collapsed. They can't afford high-priced hay, and hay has come down extreme in value. Just to give you an example, Todd, we're making offers on hay now about $200 a ton less than we were last year. We've only bought a couple thousand ton, And at this time last year, it probably bought 30,000 ton. The market has not set a trend yet. So it's very unstable. Typically by the 4th of July, you and I could have this conversation. I could rattle off where I thought prices were going to be for the next 6 months. Right now, I can't tell you where prices are going to be for the next 3 months. There's very, very, very little trade volume happening. 2 reasons for that. One is the backlog of the international and the press hay, and 2, there's not a whole lot of test hay out there. So even if the dairies had the money to cash flow, the quality of hay that they need is not there. And if the quality of the hay that they have or want is there, they're buying lower hay because they can't afford it. I think we talked last year about, multiple things aligning to have record high prices. Well, right now, multiple things have aligned to have record low prices, not record low prices, but I was looking back through some of my contracts this morning as I was looking at some Timothy hay, and we're back to where we were 5, 6, 7 years ago, maybe even lower than that right now, Todd.
Well, it's never healthy for any of us to have these radical swings, whether they go too high or they go too low. I have some concerns right now on the beef side of things that we may be getting too high in some of our markets, that we end up hurting the beef side. We end up hurting the wholesalers, the resellers not being able to move the product, and then it comes compressing back on us again, and we see another crunch on cattle. And the way that usually happens is a plant closure, and then you have less competition for those live cattle. So finding that spot of equilibrium, it'd be nice if we found that, but it doesn't help when you have a heat dome situation and you have historic droughts and some of those things that are really tangible and real of what we've dealt with here in the last couple of years. So now with the weather that's kind of moderated out a little bit around Oregon, and we had substantial snowpack in most of Oregon, do you see this thing hopefully evening out across the board, or is it going to take 2 or 3 or 4 years to move through this to where we find a place of equilibrium?
Yeah, great question. And I don't know if I can give you a realistic answer. Couple things that we look at. I mean, we talk weather. Yes, thank goodness we were above precipitation in the West, and a lot of our cattlemen are able to go out and grass and harvest the meadows. That's a good thing. So that has softened the feeder hay price too, as we never talked about previously. But as I said in the past, and I'll continue to say now, is I wish all of our cattlemen and hay farmers and ranchers and farmers would get together. So you're never on the high end of the high end, but you're never on the low end of the low end. So we can work long-term relationships to make sure that when times get tough, everybody can still stay in business. So the feeder hay price, Todd, is so dependent on the weather, the springs and the winter, as you know. Internationally, I mean, I too have some caution about the beef market. It's great that it's high. It's great that you guys are positive cash flowing, probably since one of the first times since 2014. But if you look at the imports in China, imports in China down this last month are down 47% overall, 42% on hay. But I just read an article about the beef that they're importing in Brazil and different areas. I mean, it's declining. Maybe not Brazil, Korea and Japan, it's declining. The biggest causal factor there, I think, is their economies are probably in a tougher situation than we are right now, Todd. So until that international or that foreign country works themselves through their COVID slump, the high interest rates like we're starting to in the US, I don't know if we see a stabilized hay market. So the weather will play a role, international trade and how those countries are doing and the value of the dollar will play a role. And the last one is the dairy. So dairy margins, like I said, they came up, I don't know, maybe 50 cents in class 3 this last month. And dairy futures are supposed to, climb up a few dollars by the fall. But those poor ladies and gentlemen, I mean, a lot of us in farming and ag, but dairy just gets whipsawed back and forth so tough that it could take them a year to get back into positive cash flow. So possibly it takes 2 to 4 years, but I would really, I think, kind of like you, see us climb out of it and maintain some sort of equilibrium where, you can pay your bills, have a good life, and the men and women that you're selling hay to can afford to feed it also. The short answer is I think it improves in the next year. 2 to 3, 4 years out, I don't know, Todd. So,
Okay. One of the questions that I asked last year, and we talked about a little bit, were supply chain and then the cost of doing business for hay producers. And last year, your fertilizer cost had doubled. Your fuel cost had gone up $6 per acre. And so where are you at now? Where does it look like now? And let's start with the supply chain. Are you getting parts more readily, or is that still an issue?
so the supply chain has straightened out some on the parts. But even last week, we run some new Massey Ferguson cutters, and there's a belt that normally goes out on them. And we went down to the parts store, and they said, "Hey, we only have a couple left, and the rest are in back order." So we bought the ones they had left. So there's still an underlying issue of trying to get parts in. It is better than it was last year, but I still fear and have concern that we're going to see equipment broke down that you can't find parts for, and that's new equipment. Those ladies and gentlemen that are running older model equipment, unless you can find it at a salvage yard, a lot of your equipment dealers don't stock it. So it has improved some, but it hasn't straightened itself all the way out. Fertilizer prices have kind of stabilized. They came down some, same as fuel. They've came down off our highs, but they are still probably, 80, 90% higher than what they were a couple of years ago. So it's not, our input costs aren't too much lower than what they were last year. And some of our hay is, going to sell for 50% compared to what it was last year.
Yeah. So it's a tough spot to be in right now. And you're right, going back to 2014, 2015, there's a lot of people in the beef cattle business that haven't been profitable, and they're seeing that for the first time this year. There's probably some that are celebrating low hay prices, but one of the things, and you heard me say it before, one of the mistakes that I made years ago was when there was a glut of hay, a lot of it had been rained on. I bought some hay for cheaper than I should have, and the mistake was it was offered to me at a low price, and I counter offered with $10 less, and I should have countered offered with $10 more, and so and I sincerely mean that was one of the mistakes that I made, and it was a big mistake because it was a friend, it was a neighbor, and I never bought hay from him again, and those are relationship building things that we should do to try to prop each other up as neighbors, as fellows in agriculture that help us through these times. So, Mark, gonna wrap this up, but I wanted to offer you some closing thoughts here on any advice you want to lend, any reflections that you might have over the session, and if you don't want to even talk about session, that's perfectly fine.
Well, no, I no problem talking about session, but it's kind of like you said, and kind of like we talked about last year, even in session or selling hay, it's about relationships. So, I mean, I'm going to be pretty fortunate. I have about 3,000 ton of feeder hay contracted. Same ranches that I've contracted for many years. And last year, I darn sure wasn't on the high end of the high end. But this year, they've called me up and said, "Mark, you're not going to be on the low end of the low end. So I'll be okay." And that's kind of like the attitude I take into politics, Todd, is I think that was my fourth session now. And I've been pretty fortunate to build relationships, not only on my Republican side, but also my Democrat colleagues. And even though there was a lot of politics involved in the session, which, as you know me well, I prefer policy over politics, but sometimes you get trapped in it. But those relationships allowed us to bring some successful things into Oregon. It wasn't all bad. It wasn't where we wanted to end up possibly as conservatives in agriculture, but we had got a good drought package of 100 and I think 30 million. A lot of that will help modernization of irrigation, help farmers into the future. One of the things that without your tenacity, Todd, I know it wouldn't be coming through is the meat processing. So through one of the rural economic development packages, we got another, I think, $10 million for meat processing, which is a good thing. We need to keep capitalizing that because, as you know, we're at 14 applications put in and we're only able to fund a couple. So hopefully we can continue that value add ag. And 955, once again, I'm going to brag about you, Todd, is without your tenacity at the end, that bill probably dies. And for those that don't know, that's a suicide hotline for farmers and ranchers for those in ag. Oregon has one of the highest suicide rates in the nation, but the agriculture suicide rate in Oregon, I think, is 52% higher than the state average. Got that through, Todd. That's a good thing. So there's some good takeaways, but it comes from people like you and OCA members, Sarah Lillefelt. The list goes on and on. The name is skipping me, but you're going to have to tell me who came down and testified on the wolf situation. Rep Levy was able to get some more capitalization in that fund, but all in all, the better relationships you have, even with those that you think might think a little different than you, the better off we can do as Oregonians.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Mark, and really appreciate your work. Really appreciate you being down there and your friendship, not only to myself personally, but to all of agriculture, to Oregon Cattlemen's Association. Thanks again. Thanks for getting on today.
Appreciate it, Todd. Be safe, my friend. See you Thursday.
All right. Bye.